Yo, what's up, everybody? I'm live. Today, what I really wanted to do was go over all of the interview questions that I was actually asked during this past job search. I interviewed with a bunch of companies, but 3 of them had really great coding questions and problems to solve that I want to cover specifically. After the interviews, I came home, coded these up, put them up on GitHub, just to kind of ingrain it in my brain, those concepts, and to share with you guys what kind of questions get asked and what my solutions look like. I just want to cover, as a result of all those interviews, I did get a job with Adobe. I'm starting that here in less than 2 weeks, so super excited about that. It's a web development job. This is my first web dev job, kind of transitioning from a DevOps position. So let's get started. This is my GitHub profile. I'll link it in chat for you guys. Yeah, that's my GitHub profile. And basically, I tagged everything with the word interview. You should see here in the tag section, all of the repos that I started that are answers to interview questions have the word interview in it. So here we go. 3 major companies, Facebook, Snap Kitchen, and HomeAway, are the ones that I did. So I'll just kind of start at the top, work my way down. We'll go through it, and I'll show you everything. By the way, here is the filter for just the interview repositories if you're interested. So the first one is Snap Kitchen Slider. And I kind of wrote the readmes up in a way that kind of presents the question to you if you were an interviewee. This one was cool. So the interviewer said, hey, I want you to recreate the meal slider from Snap Kitchen's homepage. He essentially wanted me to make this thing. A little slider with a thing in the middle that slides around. Now, I will say their implementation bugged me for a couple of reasons. One, it didn't happen on that reload. Some reloads, the bottom of this price tag gets cut off. And then 2, these arrows are not centered in the circles, so it totally bugs me. All right, so the cool thing about this one was they said, hey, use whatever editor or environment you want. So I got to use Code Sandbox for this just because it was super easy to pull up a React application and go. Again, no assumptions. It was kind of crystal clear. So let's show you my solution. I'm not going to clone it and build it from scratch because I already have this hosted up on Netlify. So here's the live demo that I did. And this is my solution here. If we put them side to side, you could see they're pretty similar. I actually kind of lifted a lot of styling from Snap Kitchen's website just to make it look nice. The core functionality of this was the JavaScript. They wanted to know if I could do the JavaScript. So my slider looks like this. Very similar. Now, one feature that my slider has that theirs doesn't is once you get to the end, doink, 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 this right-hand button grays out. The cursor is no longer a pointer finger. It's just normal. Theirs, you get to the end. It also scrolls a lot slower, it responds very slowly. Nothing changes. It looks like you can click on it, but you can't. You don't know your position in the list, kind of. So mine can actually scroll really, really fast, which is cool. Performance seems to be better. I'll give you a super fast overview of the code in each one of these. So let's pop it up. So I'm going to reload my VS Code editor in the Snap Kitchen slider. And then I'll just show you the code. So essentially, this is kind of where everything happens. I made just a basic file that exports an array of objects that are all the foods. And all this information was pulled directly from Snap Kitchen. The photo, the description, the calories, the tags, all that. So I didn't have to do too much work there. So I just stored all that hard-coded in a file. And then let me show you where I actually call slider. So I believe I call it in my index page. Yeah, and I just stick the slider component there. Now, obviously, this is not a great component design because I'm not passing children to it. Slider only renders what's inside of it. But I have an action item for myself. I want to make an NPM package out of this so I can use this slider in other applications. So here's the slider. I use styled components here, so you'll notice I just define a lot of like styled divs. And a slider needs a few things. It needs a wrapper around its entire self with a no wrap. This is so that all your elements can align horizontally. And as you click the left and right buttons, you're just translating it left and right, the CSS transform property. The slides is another div, which is one giant div inside of the slider. This is where the actual transform is occurring. It's itself left and right. And then inside of slides is the individual slides that are inline block taking up the full width and height of their container. So it's pretty simple. I keep track of what index of item that I'm on, and then I keep track of my translate value so that anytime I click an arrow left or right, all I do is update the index. And there's no wraparound in this particular slider. If you're on the 0th item and you try to press left, nothing happens. So I have a previous and a next. And so that updates just the index in state. But then what happens is I have an effect. Anytime index is updated, we set the translate to the index times -500. So let's say you're on the 3rd item. That's going to translate it to -1500 because the width of the slider is 500. Now this can be dynamic. I did hard code it here. And then I also made like a kind of slick arrow component where it knows whether to use the left or the right font awesome icon and if it's disabled or not. So that's pretty much it. Inside slides is something that I called there are many inside of slides, there are multiple slide components, each one wrapping something that I called a food card. And this is the children that I would be putting in. So let's say I make this a real component. Children would be essentially replaced here. Instead of food card, we would render each of the children. All right, that's the gist of that one. I'll stick with that company. So this was one interviewer. This was a front-end guy. This guy was a more back-end guy. Snap Kitchen Competition. He wanted to see if I could write plain JavaScript. So what he had me do is simulate like a powerlifting competition where you generate the competitors, randomize their results like squat, bench, and deadlift, and then determine winners for each lift, as well as the overall totals. And then I just kind of did some extra things when I coded up this example, except the number of lifters as a CLI argument. So if I only want 5 or 10 or 100, I can do it. And I used this really cool API called uinames.com to generate a random profile for each lifter, like their name and their gender. And I also select winners based on gender, because as you know, powerlifting competitions, men don't compete against women. They are separated by gender. Excuse me. Whew. Knew that was coming. Okay. Oh, it's just not going to stop. So this one I will pull down and execute locally. So I'll go back out here, my projects directory. I'll reload my VS Code editor into Snap Kitchen Competition. And then from here on out, we'll just follow the README. So it says run index.js with a number, and this would be the number of competitors. I wonder if I could just run it with -h. I can't remember. Yeah, so it does tell you options here. So it says -n number of lifters, and it is optional. So let's just do node index.js no -n flag. There we go. So this is what it looks like. First of all, I want to point out you can use console.table in Node.js, and it prints these gorgeous tables of your objects. Highly recommend. So I kind of like show every step of the way. So here's all of our lifters, male and female, and all their numbers. This has all been randomized. Their names have been randomized and their numbers have been randomized. Then I show the list of only males and then only females. And I do that because when you're looking at winners for each category, it's nice to look at that these male winners are actually winning. So for instance, who's the winner for, let's say, overall total males? Let's look at the males column or the males entry, and the totals are 853, 1442, and 1215. So the total winner is 1442. His name is Nicholas Weaver. So let's make sure that's right. Total is Nicholas Weaver with 1442. There you go. We'll do the same thing for women. What about who deadlifted the most? So for females, there's only two. Madison deadlifted 348. Sandra deadlifted 837. So Sandra is going to take the cake for deadlift at 837. There you go. So you can do this with any number. So this was 5. Let's do 20. And obviously I'm not going to run through all these comparisons here, but it generates a lot more people, has a list of males and females, and chooses winners. There you go. So I will review the code just a little bit. This one I tried to write really, really clean. So if you look at my main method, first of all, I have a CLI file where I use commander. And with commander, I just make a -- number argument that's optional. So I parse the command line arguments, and then based on that number entered, I generate lifters. And so let me show you that. Lifters is here. If you look at generate lifters, it calls this thing generate people. And this is where I think I differentiated myself here. I went to uinames.com, which is this great website that just generates fake data for like users. Doink. And it's like, this is all fake and immediate, and you don't have to have an API key or nothing. It's totally open. I linked that in the chat for you guys to check out. So I'm just generating like these fake names and genders and returning a list of people. And then to each person, I add all the powerlifting stuff, the squat, bench, dead. There you go. Also have two other methods in here called get males and get females, where it just runs a dot filter and pulls out specific genders. So after I generate a list of lifters, I simulate the competition. And I wanted to make this a discrete step. Like when I generated lifters, I could have just randomized their results immediately, but I wanted to show that the compete step was a discrete step. So I had a method here called compete where I just randomized a number in this thing called simulate and updated the lifts. Simulate's another file over here where I have methods for simulating squat, bench, dead, and simulating all the lifts together. And then after you simulate, you determine who the winners are with this method called podium. And podium finds the males and females and determines the winners out of each section. It calls a winner file here. And this is the method that powers it all. It takes all the lifters and what category, squat, bench, dead, or total, that you want to determine like who is the maximum. And then prints out a giant summary like I showed you. And look at this, console.table is the unique thing I did here. So that's how I got those really cool printouts. So that was the Snap Kitchen interview. One was more, Node.js focused, kind of back-end pure JavaScript. And then the other one was front-end, something very practical, like, hey, build something that's on our website. So the next one I'll do is Facebook. Facebook was a really interesting interview because I did many steps with them. I did phone interviews, and then I also flew out to California to do in-person interviews. They asked really great questions that kind of the interviewer could tweak to make harder if need be. So let's start with this nearest neighbors thing. So this is the classic nearest neighbors problem. He phrased it a little bit differently though. So he said basically, given any point on a map, or given any point in a XY coordinate grid, find the n closest points to a given point P. So these are inputs. The input point P is what you want to find other points closest to, and the n closest points is a number that the user provides. How many closest points do you want? So here we go. I'll talk a little bit about assumptions here. So this was very free form. I really had to make some assumptions. He didn't tell me how I would be given points as input, so I said, look, it's a giant file. And here for this example, I created a neighbors.py script that just generates that file. So I'm going to open up this Facebook nearest neighbors and give it a run. Again, reloading VS Code. So this -R says reload the current window. Don't open a new one. And I'm going to reload into Facebook nearest neighbors. All right, we're just going to follow the README here. So this one has a lot of interesting stuff in it. So we will run the help first. So this argument's required, a path to the neighbors file. Again, this is an assumption I made in the interview stating you will give these to me in a file. But now you have two optional parameters. You have origin, which if you don't provide anything, it assumes 0, 0, and the number of nearest neighbors to find. I think it's 3 by default. So let's just run it. Actually, let's generate a neighbors.txt first. So here's the current neighbors.txt. And I wrote this nice little script in tools neighbor.py with a method called createPoint that just randomizes points between -100 and 100 because I want all 4 quadrants of the graph, right? Whoops. I want all 4 quadrants of the graph, XY graph. So I need to generate points between -100 and +100 on both axes in order to get all 4 quadrants. So it generates a point and then prints it in a string format because this file is essentially just a bunch of strings. So that's how it gets dumped out. So I'm gonna run this just so you can see. So let's do like 5 neighbors. There, now we only have 5. And 10 neighbors, there you go. And 100 neighbors, there you go. So this is just a helper script I wrote to generate list of neighbors. So here's a randomly generated one. Looking at this, we're trying to figure out the closest points. We'll use 0, 0. It looks like these two are probably going to be the closest, numbers 1 and 2. So we'll see. So let's run this. Python fnn. We're going to give it the path to neighbors, which is in this directory. And we're going to say the number is, let's just say 2. And if it's 2, these two should show up as the closest neighbors. We're not specifying -0 because the default value is 0, 0. So whatever's closest to 0, 0. And look, my guess was right. So 349 and 891 are the closest. And these are the distance away. I think it's called the Euclidean distance. You just use essentially the Pythagorean theorem to find this. So there you go. And we could do this for something crazy like some other origin, like 100, 100, whatever's closest to 100, 100. And shit, I don't know, 891, probably the same too, maybe. Yeah, the same too. Okay, what points are closest to, let's do this, 78, -97. Yep, so that point, because we already had that in the list, and 61, -73, pretty close as well. Sweet. So let's show you how this works. It's all powered by this point class. I'm pretty proficient in Python. I was going to say really good, but I'm pretty proficient. I made a point class that can be initialized in many ways. So first of all, it can be initialized just by handing it an x, y coordinate to floats. And all it has is two values in the class, x and y. Another way it can be initialized is from a string. Like for instance, one of these strings in neighbors. So you could just take that line, pass it in, and create a point. And then I also made a from chords method, which is just the same thing as init, but more verbose, right? So that the user might understand. Made a custom string method so it prints out in the proper way. And then a distance method that says, hey, what is the distance to some other point object? And all this does is calculates delta y, delta x, and then gets the hypotenuse. So I use it like this. Here's the main method. Parse the command line arguments. Determines if parse origin. Yeah. If we passed in. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I'm going to have to show the CLI first. So if you don't pass in an origin, it actually creates a point object at 0, 0. What happens here is if it's a point object, we can assign it to origin directly. If it's not a point object, we have to convert it and make a point object from string, because whatever you entered in on the command line would be a string. So then I run the big function, or the function parse neighbors. Parse neighbors, all it does is iterate through all of the lines of the neighbors.txt file and creates a point and sticks it in a giant list. And then we call with all the neighbors, then we call nearest. So we give the origin, the number of nearest neighbors we want, and then the list of all possible neighbors. Again, this has default arguments, 0, 0 if it's not provided, 3 nearest neighbors if it's not provided, and initializes neighbors if it's not provided. So the algorithm's like this. We're going to maintain a list of the number of nearest neighbors. If that's 3, that list would be 3 items long. If it was 100, it'd be 100 items long. For every possible neighbor that we have, determine if the farthest nearest neighbor is farther away than the current neighbor, if that makes sense. So you hold a list of 3 nearest neighbors, and every time you look at a new neighbor, you kick one out if it's closer. And that's what we're saying here. If the current neighbor is closer than the farthest one in our list, we swap it. Then we print a nice summary of each of the neighbors and their distance away, like you saw here. All right, this one was really fun. We talked about performance a lot because a lot of times nearest neighbors problems come down to performance. And, one of the solutions would have been to blindly calculate the distance for every single neighbor and store that in a list and then find the max of that list. And that would be slow. You don't need to hold a giant list in memory of the distance for every single neighbor. You just need to maintain the n closest ones. I felt like I did really well on this question in person. So let's look at the next one. That was Facebook nearest neighbors. The other one I did at Facebook was this migration monitor. This was kind of a very practical question. This one says, and I'm just going to kind of read this verbatim a little bit. You want to migrate a service to a new port across all hosts that it's running on. So for instance, some database, and you want to move that database from port 2000 to port 3000 on all of the instances it's running on, because, you want to have redundant databases or databases that hold different, like for sharding purposes. So you have multiple databases serving that. So you want to write a program that monitors the process of the migration. So let's say you kick it off, and now you just want to see how it's going. You want to determine if the service has been migrated on each host, and see if there's any errors, because it might not yet have been migrated. It may have migrated successfully, or it could have been attempted to be migrated, but with errors. And then as the interview went on, the interviewer asked me, hey, how would you estimate time remaining? And how would you monitor the percent complete? And, how would you handle a large number of hosts? So I did have to make some assumptions here. We don't know what kind of service this is. In order to monitor this migration, we need a way to check and see, like, hello, are you alive? Like a status command to this service. So instead of like making an assumption like this is a database or this is an HTTP server or whatever, I just wrote a method that essentially waited a random delay and then returned a randomized true or false status. That this method could be populated with whatever you need for your particular service. So let me open it up in VS Code. Oh, I may not have cloned it. Interesting. Facebook, nope, I had not. So I got it now. And I'm going to open it up. So this one, I'll show you the CLI. It takes, well, easier to do it this way. Python fmm-h. So it takes a few required arguments: the old port that the service was on, the new port that you're migrating it to, and a list of all the hosts. And this is just a path to a file that contains all the hosts. Now I just generated this. It was the entire 1035.180 subnet, all the way from 1 down to 255. What I could have done, just like nearest neighbors, is made a thing that generates random IP addresses, as many as you want. That would be a cool improvement here. So we start with the main method. Let's just actually run it. So we'll do this. Oh, this actually takes a second to run, so I'm gonna kick it off and then wait. So this is saying our service was on port 2000. We're migrating it to port 3000, and check every single host in host.txt. So look at this. I have a little bit of like I am showing the percentage through, 20 whatever number out of 255, calculating the percent, and then estimating the time remaining. And I'll show you how I did all that. So the main method just calls monitor with the 3 inputs: the old port, the new port, and the hosts. Monitor's pretty simple. It reads all the hosts, and for every host in hosts, I do the get migration status. Oh, my bad. Nope. Prior to that. Nope. Status. Oh, yeah. No, yeah. Okay. So I call this method get migration status. And this calls that get service status. This is the thing that essentially fakes the status call to whatever service you're running. So instead of running an HTTP call or a MySQL database call, this is just going to, on a random delay, because assuming this probably takes time because it's over the network, return a random true or false value. And this roughly has like a 50-50% here. So you have to check both the old port and the new port, because if the old port's still running, it could not have been migrated yet. But if both are running, that's a problem. So you check all 4 possibilities that that the old one's not running and the new one is, and the new one's not, that means it's dead. If the old one's not running and the new one is, that means it's migrated successfully, and on, the 4 cases. So this migration status is going to return one of these 4 values: dead, migrated, unmigrated, or duplicate. Duplicate is if it's running on the old port and the new port. That's a problem. So let me go back to the monitor method here. So we get the status for that individual host. And I store it in a big old dictionary. And then what I do is I calculate the average duration by taking the time difference and just dividing it by 2. And then I calculate the progress based on how many have been done versus how many lines are in the host file. And I do all that nice little output about time that you see here. And now once I wrap up, I have all this information in a dictionary. And I spit out at the end how many are migrated versus any other status. So in this case, look, 76 have been migrated, 76.4%. And then here's the breakdown of each status: migrated, duplicate, dead, or unmigrated. This is just walking the dictionary and counting each status. And it also produces these files here: dead, duplicate, migrated, unmigrated. If your sysadmin wanted to go write some other script to loop over there and do whatever, maybe kill the duplicate ones on the old port, or reattempt the migration again on different ones. That was kind of a practical example, and I thought it was fun to code for sure. So as you'll notice, that the Facebook ones really kind of focused on like Python and kind of like data structures, algorithms, sysadmin stuff. And it turns out that was kind of the type of person they were looking for in that position. Now, I really wanted to be a front-end developer, and so HomeAway was a company I was interviewing with early on. They did a lot of front-end stuff, but also a lot of random like JavaScript stuff as well. So I'm going to start with like a little bit boring ones from HomeAway, the basic JavaScript, like, programming questions. So one was binary tree and one was essentially like a config parser, like an ini parser. We'll open up the binary tree first. So this was the example tree that I used in all of my, I think I wrote tests here, and I used this example tree. So he wanted me to do a breadth first traversal on nodes. And then as bonus points, when I came home and did it, I did a depth first as well, and supported traversal in both directions. So let's pull this one down. And honestly, it's been a long time since I've looked at this one. I think this interview was in November, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, I did have tests. Look at that. Oi, oi, oi. I don't know how to run tests. Look at that. npm run test. All right, let's do it. npm run test. So it looks like I just hard-coded the crap out of that binary tree shown in the README. Made a tree out of it. Oh, look. Require binary tree. I actually had a binary tree. All right, look. Okay, look at my test. I have a depth test where I call the depth method. That's cool. I have a traverse breadth and a traverse depth and a pre-order and an in-order and a post-order. And look at this. Oh yeah, and look, each one has a direction, so it can go to the right or to the left. Oh, traverse depth has an order property. Or you can call specifically traverse pre-order or in-order with left to right. It was kind of smart here. So a binary tree. So I constructed a binary tree. So here's what every node has. It has a value, a left and a right node. And then the binary tree, yeah, okay, algorithms. I'm not really going to go through this. This is literally just algorithms. But the binary tree has all these methods. It's got a depth method, a breadth method, a regular depth, like get the depth of the tree. And then a bunch of traversal methods. So breadth first, depth first, pre-order, and in-order. And post-order, 3 different orders. Okay. And so really, yeah, all I did was make those classes, and then my tests just created a binary tree and called methods on it. Not bad. All right, I'm going to move on from that one. That was actually the question I did the worst on in every single interview I had, because I was not familiar with traversing a binary tree, something I've just never used in practice, only in college. So the second one they asked me, that was like a pure JavaScript question, is write a config parser. Like essentially an ini parser, very similar to Python, that supports substitution. So if you had A set as hello, B set as world, and you had C defined as A and B here, you should see hello world. Again, I haven't looked at this one in a while. HomeAway config parser. Yeah, it's there. We're reloading this directory. And it looks like I wrote tests for this one too. So I think we just run the test. So it looks like the tests operate on this. It should be able to substitute elements. It should be able to do nested substitution. So C would actually be a combination of A and B, and then D would actually use C. And then it should handle empty elements as well. And here are my tests. Yeah. So get raw property means like get a property that has no, like without substitution. So yeah, look at this. Get raw property C is expected to give you A and B, right? The raw text value. I will say, guys, looking at test files is one of the best ways to figure out how to use libraries. Get raw properties. Oh, interesting. So this gets an object of all of the properties in your config file. That's pretty cool. What other methods did I set here? So get interpolated property. Yeah, so this one actually does the substitution for all of them. See, look, C gives hello world and D gives hello world. It's bradgarropy. And then look, okay, the version that does everything, get interpolated properties, multiple, do everything. Cool. I don't remember writing this code. Oh, look at this. I do a regex that gets the first part, which is like the name, and then the second part, which is the value, separated by an equal sign. Cool. Well, there you go. And it looks like I just used regexes to replace stuff. Interesting. All right, don't want to dive too deep into that. Take too long. I'll move on to some other HomeAway ones. So I went through a couple rounds of interviews with HomeAway, couple over the phone, couple on site. And so here is one of their on-site questions: design an infinite scroll. And this was done on a whiteboard. This was ridiculous to do this on a whiteboard, but I took it back home and I tried to polish it up. So I modeled it off Pokemon. So this links to like the Pokedex or whatever. And so this is just something that you can scroll a lot with. And see, I had, whoop. See, this might not work. Yeah, it loads some extras, starts at 15 and then doink, goes to 20. I have a feeling the API changed on me in the back end. Welp. Let's see. Why only 5? I think it was supposed to get like 15 at a time, 20 at a time. I don't know. Have to check and see. Anyway, so it works for one round, but you could scroll down through hundreds of Pokemon when I had this working. The Poke API is something that's actually been very unstable. I was pretty dissatisfied with it. Successfully updated. Oh, look at that. Okay, great. Maybe they're back and stable again. Cool. I'll really have to go in and check this out, because pagination wasn't working when I originally implemented this, which would make infinite scroll much, much easier. You just get one page of data at a time. But instead, I had to write all this custom crap to figure out what index I'm on and grab the next 10 and all that kind of stuff. I'll show you the code. Code-R, and I'm going to go into what was called HomeAway infinite scroll. Yeah, so look, I did make an API wrapper for the Pokemon. Oh yeah, so they give you just like a list of Pokemon, like names or whatever, and then you have to go through and retrieve each one of them individually. So this leads to like they don't give you enough information per each API call, so you have to make multiple API calls for each one. Again, very dissatisfied with that particular service. Although it's free, you can't complain that much. So here's my Pokemon card class. The whole thing is a link to the Pokemon.com Pokédex. And then, I have its number in there. I have its sprite, its image, and its name. Just very simple, right? Number, image, name. Pokemon list. Okay, this is where it all happens, yeah. Looks like I had a search bar in here. Huh. So here's the Pokemon list. And what do we do here? This is written in class components. Haven't used classes in a long time. Not since hooks. So what do we have? The offset and the limit. Yeah. So the offset tracks like which one I'm on in chunks of 15. And this would just be a page. Like you would just hold your page offset in state, and then you can issue an API call that includes the page offset, and it's all good. So on scroll and a get more method. So on scroll, that's the thing that may be messing up. I don't know. Where it detects if you've reached the end of the div. What's actually calling on scroll? Oh, window, right. So you add on scroll to the window. Yeah, and then Pokemon are in state, and you just map through them and display their cards. Also fairly simple. I think it's just an API issue that's causing me to not fetch the right amount. All right, and the last one that I did was HomeAway Typeahead. So in this one, they asked me to scaffold out in plain HTML, then HTML plus CSS, and then in React components, how you would implement a Typeahead. And I went ahead and built it. And I hooked it up to the GitHub API. I figured that'd be the best bet here. So again, I lifted a bunch of styles, just like Snap Kitchen, just to make it look good real fast. And so let's say I just want to search for somebody like myself. As I'm typing, I'm getting Typeahead results for like the next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. And here we go. I found me. That's what I want to bring up. And this just grabs some data from GitHub and dumps it on the screen here. Look at this. Woo! I'm working for Adobe now, or as of April 29th. So this is how this one works. I wonder if Scott's on here. Tolinsky. Tolinsky. Is that him? Yo, that's him. What about Wes Boss? Those are my boys, Syntax FM. Cool. So this is a good demo of the Typeahead. This one seems to be pretty stable. I wouldn't think GitHub's API would mess up, would it now? And all these front-end ones, I had a lot of fun making. Typeahead, infinite scroll, the Snap Kitchen slider. What else? Like, these were my most fun projects. Typeahead, infinite scroll, Snap Kitchen slider. Yeah, like these were so much fun because these are components that you'd use all over the place. And if I can make my next goal is to make these packages essentially. Not really the infinite scroll, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but even some portions of the Typeahead, if I could make these reusable Definitely the slider. These are like fancy components that can really be used anywhere. And I know it's reinventing the wheel, but it's I want to make it mine. I think the beauty of programming is building your own empire, making it yours. So I had tons of fun with these interview questions and interviewing as a whole. I really viewed this job search not as like a desperate thing, but more as I'm really just going to go out there and see if I can go be a web developer, because it's something I want to do, and I think I'm prepared enough, and I'm going to present the best me that I can. And it looks like it worked out. A lot of companies were excited about me, and in the end I ended up with Adobe. Great place to be for web development. So these were all the interview questions I got asked. There's one more wild card in here. You'll notice it's a company called Meshify. Excuse me, I need a whiskey. Yeah, Meshify is a smaller Internet of Things company here in Austin. And you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna see if this runs. I don't think it will. Oh my God, it's here. Okay. Wow. So this company was pretty aggressive as far as what they wanted me to do for an interview. Code up this whole thing where like you're retrieving hundreds of tweets, thousands of tweets from Twitter, and checking their hashtags and like dumping it into the UI. And you know, honestly, I thought it was a lot of work, and they wanted me to do it in like a day, or like not even, you know, and I'm working a full-time job and have kids and all this kind of stuff. And I got so overwhelmed with this. This was a take-home assignment, and I got so overwhelmed that I just called them and I was like, look, I think I'm just going to stop, you know? I'm just going to stop because it's too much. Let's see if it runs. Is this Create React app? What is this? Yeah, it's Create React app. Was it 3001? No, 3000? What the hell? What port does Create React app run on, you guys? Okay, that looks promising. Welcome to Express. Son of a bee. CD front end and npm start. React script start. I don't know. Let's look it up. What port is default? 3000. The reason this was so stupid was because clients can't make a request to Twitter. So I had to bring up an Express backend, put in a route so that I can friggin' call the Twitter search for a hashtag. And that's why I thought this was so ridiculous. It's like, I don't think they even knew the complexity of the question. Anyways, I'm bitching. I don't know why this isn't loading on 3000. Oh, there it is. It takes forever. So this is where I got it to in like a day or so, where I'm essentially looking for a hashtag IoT. And then once I found all tweets with hashtag IoT in it, they wanted me to count what were like the most, like the top number of words in each one. And that's insane. Like, that's a lot of data. Go through all the posts with hashtag IoT and then count the occurrences of the words and post the top 20 words. I got something working. But yeah, this was incredibly stressful at the time. And I said, look, this is way too much work to expect somebody to do for an interview. And you're not paying for this, or like, this was going to take a while, especially because you had to bring up a backend to run Twitter API calls. But enough of me bitching. This was a Metrify assignment. And you know what? I don't think I'm ever going to finish this. Let's just wipe it out. Blink, it's gone. And let's go back to my repos. That's not good to see. And I'm just going to remove it off my local machine. Just get it out of here. arm-rf meshify. See you later, bud. So again, all in all, these interviews are super fun. You'd notice that there's nothing from Adobe here. Adobe didn't ask me very many technical questions. Why? Because they had already seen my GitHub. They'd already read my blogs. And they were able to review stuff like that. And I think that says a lot about an interviewer and a lot about a company that understands, if I look at your GitHub, it is the source of truth for how well you code. And the search is over. The pressure's off. Temporarily, the pressure's off. There's no pressure to interview. But I guess now the pressure's on. I have to deliver. I have to go be a web developer for real. And I'm getting a little bit of imposter syndrome, but I'm super excited because the more I did these, especially the Snap Kitchen slider, I built this in like a night using like React Hook style components, and it worked really well. And I just thought, yeah, this is going somewhere. I'm getting better at this stuff. So anyways, thank you for joining me on this. I hope it helped you out. And at least you got the solutions to a bunch of interview questions that you can use and study for yourselves. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one where I'll probably be starting a new exciting project. See you next time. Peace.